it's Karen from the University City Public Library, and I'm back again to tell you a story. This story is about the prairie chicken. Now, the prairie chicken is a bird that used to live pretty much everywhere, but now they only live in the areas where the states of Kansas and Nebraska and the Dakotas are. And prairie chickens have a habit of, when they're trying to find a mate, they do a dance. And when they do this dance, it sounds kind of like hammering. Well, the Algonquin people would hear this sound, and they decided that yes, that sounded like hammering. So they came up with this story about why prairie chicken makes that sound. And in this story, prairie chicken is a carpenter. And he's a carpenter who makes canoes. Now, one day, an eagle came to visit prairie chicken. And he said, "Oh, prairie chicken, I would dearly love a canoe for myself so I could paddle up and down the river and just enjoy myself." Prairie chicken says, "Yeah, I can do that. I can make you a canoe." So he goes back in the woods to his workshop, and eventually he comes out with a canoe for Eagle. And Eagle sees it and says, "Oh, this is wonderful. This is great. I'm going to have such fun with this canoe." And he puts it in the water and he goes paddling down the river. Well, after seeing Eagle's canoe, the owl came to see prairie chicken. Said, "Hello, prairie chicken. I've seen the canoe that you built for Eagle. And I was wondering, could you build a canoe for me?" "Of course I can," said Prairie Chicken. And he went back in his workshop and he came out with a canoe the perfect size for Owl. And it was even painted in the colors of Owl. "Oh, thank you. I love my new canoe. Thank you." And he paddled off down the river. Well, soon, all kinds of birds were coming to see Prairie Chicken. A blue jay came, and Prairie Chicken made him a canoe and painted it blue with gray and black markings, just like the blue jay. He made a yellow canoe with black trim, just like the goldfinch. Soon, other birds were coming, and he had a crow and a blackbird come. And they said, "Prairie Chicken, we'd like canoes, but if you paint them like us, we're afraid we'll get them mixed up because they'll both be black." "Let me think about this," said Prairie Chicken. And he thought about it, and he went back to his workshop. This took longer because he was building two. And when he came out with two canoes, both of them were painted black. The crow's was a little bit bigger to fit him better, but the blackbird's had red markings on the side, just like the red patches on the wings of the blackbird. "Oh, Prairie Chicken, you did this perfect. Now we'll never get them mixed up, and this one looks just like me with my red patches." Well, soon more and more birds were coming, and Prairie Chicken was kept busy working in his workshop, hammering away. He made a long, skinny canoe for the tall, skinny crane. He made a canoe that he painted orange in the front and brown in the back for the robin. He made a small canoe for the bluebird, and he painted it the exact blue of the bluebird's feathers. Then one day, a tiny little hummingbird came. Mr. Prairie Chicken, I'd really like a canoe for me. Said Prairie Chicken. You are so tiny, I'm not sure I can do that. But I will try. So he went back to his workshop, and everybody listened for the hammering. But they didn't hear any. They're like, oh, I'm afraid he got stumped on this one. He can't figure out how to make a canoe for the teeny tiny hummingbird. Well, eventually, out came Prairie Chicken, and he was carrying a tiny canoe that he had carved from half of a walnut shell. And it was the perfect size for the hummingbird, and he painted it that pretty iridescent green that some hummingbirds are. And he gave it to the hummingbird, and he gave the hummingbird a little paddle that he could use with his beak. And soon the little hummingbird was out on the river, happily paddling along. Well, the birds, who had all these great canoes, decided they were going to have a regatta. Now, a regatta is kind of a parade of boats. So they were making all their plans for this regatta, and they were going to paddle down the river all in a parade. But then they noticed Prairie Chicken and said, Prairie Chicken, you've made all these great canoes for us, but you don't have one for yourself. Why haven't you built your own? Well, said Prairie Chicken, I've been thinking about that, and I've been trying to plan the best canoe ever for myself. And the more I thought, I decided that most canoes have a front and a back, so they can go forward and backward. But what I would like is a canoe that can go in all directions. So that's what I'm going to build for myself. So he went back into his workshop in the woods, and they heard, because he was working hard on his own canoe. And soon he comes out of the woods carrying his canoe. And it wasn't like any canoe you've ever seen before. Because he wanted to be able to go in all directions, he made it round, like a nest. And he brought it out and he put it in the water, and he climbed in and said, see, because it's round, I can go in all directions. So he started paddling, and he paddled, and he paddled, and he paddled and paddled and paddled and paddled, and all his canoe did was turn in circles. Well, the other birds saw this, and they started to laugh. And they laughed and laughed. What a silly canoe. You can't go anywhere. You're just spinning in circles. This is the funniest thing we've seen. Well, poor Prairie Chicken was so embarrassed He climbed out of his canoe and he left it on the river and he ran back in the woods where his workshop was, and he never came out again. But occasionally they could hear him They didn't know what he was building, but he stayed pretty much away from everyone. And they tried very hard to get him to come back out, but no, he was too embarrassed. And soon, the only time he came out for people to see him was when it was time to take a mate. And he would do his dance so he could attract a female prairie chicken. And that is the story of Prairie Chicken's Canoes. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.